In the last lecture, have you been taught the epidemiological study designs? What are the types of epidemiological study designs? কি কি ধরনের হয় বলো? What are the types? Observational and experimental. Two broad types. Observational and experimental. So, what are the main differences between the two types is in the observational what happens? The investigator of the research or the study is observing whatever is happening. Okay? Whether it be a cross-sectional study that is done at one point of time only, or a longitudinal study like a case control cohort study that is prospective, or then taking the cases and then retrospectively seeing the exposure. Whatever it is, the results and the study designs, these are all observational in nature. Whatever is happening, the investigator is recording it and analyzing it. But observational studies are very different in nature from the experimental studies. So what are experimental studies? Experimental studies are those in which the investigator themselves give the exposure. Okay, whatever the factor they want to study, whatever the outcome they want to study, the factor or the exposure is given by the investigator himself or herself. Okay, so that is not a natural study, not happening in nature as per se, but it is given artificially by the investigator. So let's start with the experimental studies. Now, researcher actively interferes to determine the effect of intervention on the natural course of events. So what those interventions can be? They can be many types, like administration of a drug or a vaccine. Maybe they want to study the effect of a drug. So they are taking one group in which they are giving the drug, in another group they are giving some standard drug or placebo. And then they are comparing the effect of that new drug. So that study can be done. Then there is performance of a diagnostic or a therapeutic procedure. Maybe one procedure is used in one group, another standard procedure is used in another group, and then seen whether that new procedure is better or worse, or whatever the result is. Introduction of an educational tool, okay, or a awareness campaign, or any kind of promotional activity that is given to one group versus the other. So in these types of interventions, if you want to study the effect of the intervention, that is when the experimental study design is used. So what are the aim of the experimental studies? Firstly, it provides scientific proof of the etiology. Now whenever you are giving an exposure, whenever the investigator is giving that exposure himself or herself, then they are studying the effects of that exposure on the people in the group. So whatever it is there, it is a prospective study. So they are starting especially with the exposure and then later seeing the outcome. So as I said before, in establishing causality, you need the temporality, means you need time to follow from the exposure to the outcome. So whenever you do such kind of a study, you can establish the causality of that outcome, right? So you are following from the exposure that is given by the investigator and then following to the outcome. So you can establish the causality, that is provide scientific proof of etiology or causal factor or the causal factor. Now you can say the same can be done in a cohort study only. Cohort study, you are also studying with an exposure in one group versus the other group who are not exposed to that factor. But again, that is a natural study, like your the investigator is just observing what is the exposure and the outcome, and they are following through time to see whether the outcome is there. But here the investigator is giving the exposure themselves. So that is a difference with the cohort study. Then there is effectiveness or efficacy of the health services. So whatever health intervention is given, like a drug, vaccine, whatever it is studied, this experimental studies can study the effectiveness and outcome, the efficacy of that service, and modification and control of diseases. So finally, by testing some drug or vaccine, you can control the spread of the diseases. So this is a basic aim of the experimental studies, why these studies are done. Any experimental study or any very new drug or vaccine that is introduced in the human population, it first basically starts with animal studies. Okay, this is like in a clinical trial. Where if there is a testing of a drug or a vaccine, that is usually called a clinical trial. Whatever new vaccines are developing around the world, as you sometimes hear, there is a dengue vaccine, malaria vaccine, COVID vaccine, all these trials that go on. Okay, so there are many phases of that trial. Especially in those cases, there is a something called phase zero. Phase zero means animal studies. Okay, so at the very beginning, some those drugs or vaccines are tested in the animals that are bred in the laboratory for testing purposes only. So it starts with that. So there is experimental replication of human disease in those animals. But why have I marked in red? Because that is also a drawback. Not all drugs or vaccines or maybe all diseases, they do not perform the same in animals as they do in humans. Sometimes the effects are opposite also. Okay, so it is taken as a at the face value. Okay, if it is working in animals, maybe it will work in humans. But then again, if animal studies were the ultimate, then there would be no need of experimental studies in humans. So what is that? That it is just a starting phase. So it does not mean that if it is established in animal studies, that means it will work in humans 100%. It is never a guarantee of that. So that is also a drawback, that you cannot always replicate that in the humans. But yes, if you are testing like comparing the dosages, that's small dose versus medium dose versus high dose, if you want to test the efficacy of the drug or the vaccine, you can test that, the testing of the efficacy, and finally completing the natural history of a disease. If you are confused about the development of disease process, how it works in human bodies, you can see that first in animal bodies. You introduce the disease in the maybe the mice and then see the progression of that disease. Okay, for example, many testing is done nowadays for Alzheimer's. They are testing that in the mice, giving them the gene and seeing the development, because you cannot test that in humans directly, right? So they are testing it in these mice and then introducing the drug and seeing whether the drug is working or not. It is like that. So all these comprise the animal studies that are there usually in the clinical trials, phase zero. Now, after that, there is a studies or experiments in the humans. But obviously, it should be ethical. What do you mean by ethical? Any idea? Very important in experimental studies. What do you mean by ethical consideration? Ethical consideration means that before all these ethical rules and regulations were put in place, before doing any study, before all these rules were there were no, especially no rules before Second World War especially, and people used to experiment in anyone, anything, disease. So it was a basic human rights violation, number one. Okay. So after that, what happened is in 1948, after the formation of WHO and all the human rights group, they put forth this conventions that uh, yes, experiments or studies can be done in humans, obviously, because otherwise research will stop. But they have to follow some ethical guidelines or practices. Firstly, there is autonomy. Autonomy means the person who is being tested upon, the volunteer, for example, or the patient, they have the right to participate, and if they want to, they can get out of the study at any point of time. And if there is compensation involved, if the person is adversely harmed for some reason, you have to give them compensation. Okay? So that is the ethical principle of autonomy. Okay, then there is the confidentiality. Confidentiality means the patient's personal details will not be uh, revealed outside the research. Only the researchers who are doing the study may know. If the study is published and the people other than that study team, they will not know the identity of that participant. That is the confidentiality. Okay, then there is the principle of beneficence and non-maleficence. Beneficence means whatever study you are doing, it should always be for some benefit for the patient. The patient will be benefited in some effect. And non-maleficence it will do no harm. Okay, and finally there is a principle of justice. So these are all the ethical principles. So all the studies should abide by those ethical principles. If you are wanting to do a study that is not abiding by these rules, then the study will not be permitted to do. So the ethical committee is there in every institute, in every college, and you have to submit your study protocol, what you want to do to them, so that they will review it, and you have to, and if it is get accepted, means they have tested that you have followed all the ethical principles, and they are letting you do the study, especially in experimental studies. Observational, that is not a problem because you are just observing, but in experimental, where you are giving the exposure yourself, it is rigorously tested. What blood test you are doing, what drug you are giving, whether it is harming the patient, whether there is a single chance of harming the patient, they will not let you do it. Okay, so these are the ethical considerations. Then there is the logistic considerations. If you are giving an exposure, following through the time to see the outcome, it always involves a lot of manpower, money, time, materials. Okay, so whether those are there with the participant or the investigator or not. For usually these experimental studies, there is always funds, grants, okay, that is given. So that is, it should be considered whether you can conduct the study, you have the resources or not. Benefit versus risk. Obviously, again, the ethical principle comes in action that the benefit should be more than the risk. Whether if the risk is more, that the patient may be harmed adversely, then usually the study is not permitted to do. But yes, if the patient is benefited more than the risk that can be there, then the study is usually done. So you have to always keep in mind that whenever you want to do an experimental study, you have to keep the benefit in mind more, and the risk, and you have to outline whatever risks are there that can be there in the in this experimental study, what risk can be there, and you have to outline that and then provide necessary compensation. Cannot do study on intervention known to be ineffective or harmful. Again the same thing, if you know some intervention is going to be harmful for the patient, like you cannot study smoking leads to lung cancer like an experimental study. You cannot give smoking to one group and then non-smoking to another group. You know that is harmful. So you cannot do that study as an experimental study. And finally, all these considerations are done under the ethical committee. This picture I have shown because this is one of the first experimental studies that was done in humans. At that time, there was no such thing as study, but this is the 1700s. This is in the interior of a ship. At that time, the most prevalent disease in the sailors was scurvy, vitamin C deficiency. Why? Because they were out in the sea for months on end and they had minimal access to fruits. Okay, they were like consuming maybe fish and meat, some cereals, but that's it. And they were very deficient in those nutrients, in vitamins. So scurvy used to occur a lot. So this man James Lind, what he did, he wanted to get to the root cause of the scurvy, that whatever is the cause and we need to solve this. So he got on this ship, 12 people, after some time 12 sailors were suffering from scurvy. He divided them into 6 groups and give them 6 interventions each. He said that you take this, some were given brandy, some were given lime, some were given some fruits, apple and etc. There were 6 such groups and they were told you take this every day. After 5-6 days, they saw that the people who were consuming the fruit, the 2 people who were consuming the fruit, they got better. Only they got better. So James Lind understood that okay, this consumption of fruit can prevent scurvy or cure scurvy, and then he ended the experiment and gave those fruits to all the sailors so that the scurvy in them is cured as well. So this was the experiment, one of the earlier known experiments that was done to prevent such a disease. Okay, so this is a human experiment. Now, firstly, how will you know if a study is a experimental study? You have to first assess the outcome on the exposure, if any. For example, you are reading a study or wanting a case scenario is given to you. You have to first understand what is the exposure mentioned in the study, what is the outcome mentioned in the study. For example, occurrence of diabetes, nephropathy and retinopathy among diabetic patients. Exposure is intense lifestyle modification. So if you are giving intense lifestyle modification to diabetic patients, then what is the occurrence of the diabetic nephropathy and retinopathy? That is, diabetic complications are occurring in those patients or not. You want to understand. So you give them lifestyle modifications. Did the investigator assign exposure? Yes. And has the investigator determined who will be exposed and unexposed? Yes. So all these considerations have to be kept in mind. The investigator is deciding the whole procedure of the experimental studies. Now, what are the types of experimental studies? This is important. There are two broad types: randomized controlled trials and non-randomized trials. Randomized controlled trials and non-randomized controlled trials are different in one thing, that is randomization, as you can understand from the names. What is this randomization? We will see. Under randomization, there is a parallel study design, concurrent study design, crossover study design, and there are many others that is not within your scope. That is like factorial, etc. But you don't need to study that. Just remember the parallel study design and the crossover study design. Then under non-randomized, there is the uncontrolled trial, that is without any control group, natural experiments, and then before, after, or pre-post studies. So these are the non-randomized trials. Now, the most important experimental study is the randomized controlled trials. Now, as you can see, there are two parts or three parts in that name: randomized controlled trials. Randomized means there is randomization going on. Controlled means there is a control group. And trial means there is an experimental trial. Now, this randomized, do not confuse it with random sampling. Okay, you will again come across a term called sampling, like how do you take the patient from the population in your study. There is a term there called random sampling, but that random sampling is different from randomization in an RCT. Okay, random sampling means the process of taking patients from a population or people from population in your study. That is a technique there. But randomization means you are putting the people randomly into different groups. So these are the two differences. So random sampling and randomization are different. Just keep that in mind so you are not confused later. Random sampling and randomization is different. So what is randomized control trials? It is a group of participants fulfilling certain inclusion and exclusion criteria, randomly assigned to two separate groups, each receiving a different intervention. So there are two groups. People are put randomly in those two groups. After they meet the inclusion and exclusion criteria, that is the criteria for participating in the study. And then after separating in the two groups, they are given different interventions, both by the investigator. Random assignment implies that each participant has equal chance of being allocated to the two groups. Now, what is this random assignment or randomization means? Whatever participants are entering your study, after meeting the eligibility criteria, whenever the participants are coming in your study, they do not know which group they will be allocated into, group A or B. They do not know which drug they will receive or which treatment they will receive or which diagnostic procedure they will receive. They do not know. So that is a random allocation or randomization. Even the investigator themselves do not know. Okay, the investigator themselves will not know which group this patient will be allocated into. That is called randomization. The outcomes are then compared between the intervention and the comparator group. At the end, when the outcome is there, you compare the outcomes between the two groups. Now, what are the steps of an RCT? Firstly, drawing up a protocol. At first, you have to make the protocol of the study and be very clear that what kind of study, what are the criteria you are setting in the study, because you have to abide by them very perfectly. Otherwise, there is a chance of introduction of error in your study. Okay, especially in RCT. You have to do the aim and the objectives of the study. What do you want to achieve in the study? You have to first specify that. Criteria for selection of subjects. Who will be the subjects in your study? Okay. Who will be the subjects in your study? In our subject in community medicine, we do intervention with like either a vaccine or any specific health promotion intervention, maybe a training. Okay. So you have to particularly specify which people you are going to take in your study. Okay. Which people you are going to take in your study. Then there is the sample size. You have to calculate the sample size. Then procedure for allocation of subjects. How do you allocate the subjects in the two groups? That is a randomization. And the pilot study to test the operational efficiency and feasibility. Then you do a like pre-testing study or the pilot study, a small scale study to see whether all these procedures are working efficiently or not. After it is working efficiently, you have seen, then you start the actual study. Okay. So whatever the procedure it is from the first to the end of the study, you have to write it in a protocol. Then selecting the reference and the experimental population. What do you mean by reference population and experimental population? Reference population is whatever the results you will have in your study, the results will be can be generalized or it is valid for that whole population. That is the reference population. Okay? That is the reference population. For example, a type of patient. For example, diabetic patient. You want to make a study or do a study on diabetic patients. So the diabetic patient is your reference population. And from that, the experimental population means the population that is accessible to you. You are not able to reach all the diabetic patients in your country. You are only able to reach the diabetic patients in your district maybe. So there, or in your state. So there, that is the experimental population. The people you are able to take from that reference population for your study is the experimental population. And among them experimental population, as you have reached them, now you will tell them whether you are meeting the eligibility criteria or not. Okay. Eligibility criteria, that if you are age above 18, okay, then if you are having no complications as per se, then you are included in the study. And if you are not giving consent or you are not willing to participate in your study, you are getting excluded. So that is the informed consent. The person or the patients will be informed what there will be in the study very clearly, and if they are consenting or willing to participate, then they are getting involved in the study. If they are not willing to participate after hearing everything, then they are excluded from the study. So they should be qualified or eligible for the trial. Now this step 3 is the most important step of RCT, that is randomization. Randomization, this is a step 3. Randomization, what is happening is, for example, there are so many patients that you have taken experimental population on the sample. You are now randomly assigning them into treatment group and control group. Then you are following them up for some time and then you are comparing the results. Now this random assignment, it is done to eliminate selection bias. Means the investigator will no longer be able to decide, okay, patient A will go to the group A, patient 1 will go to the group A, patient 2 will go to the group B. The investigator will not decide for themselves. Okay, so the selection bias that is happening at the level of allocation, that will be eliminated by random assignment. Then allow the comparability for both the known and the unknown factors. If the people here are randomly assigned to these two groups without anyone's control, what happens is you are distributing the factors equally, because you want to just test the efficacy of that intervention, right? You do not want interference from other factors. You just want to study that exposure's efficacy. So you have to make the other factors similar in both groups. Otherwise, you cannot test the efficacy of that particular single exposure that you want to give. So you have to make the other factors similar in both groups. So that is why randomization is the best way to do that, so that without the investigator's control, what happens is anyone can be assigned to any group. So the factors are in a certain particular, after a particular number of people, the factors are almost similarly distributed in the both groups. So if both the known factors, maybe male, female, both the known factors, age distribution, and the unknown factors, maybe something other factor is there that you are not accounting for, that you have not thought of. But randomization also makes it easier for those factors also to be equally distributed in both groups. So it allows for comparability between these two groups. So everything is similar in the two groups except the exposure or that particular drug or that particular vaccine. So it allows comparability for both known and unknown factors, and it is the heart of a control trial. So randomly you are assigning between the two groups. Now how do you randomize them? You can randomize them by random number tables, by modern day software, by sealed envelope. These are just two main examples. Traditionally random number tables were used before, and then there is the sealed envelope technique. You will see random number table, it shows like this. Okay, it shows like this. For example, there is a random number table here, and if you are putting them, for example, in an Excel sheet, and you are putting them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 100 maybe. So you are taking maybe 100 patients, you have listed 1 to 100 in an Excel sheet. Now where will one go, group A or group B? Where will two go, group A or group B? That assignment is random. That random function is there in the Excel sheet, for example. Okay, so you are putting that function and it is automatically generating the group that that person will be assigned to. So beside 1 there may be group A, beside 2 there may be group A, beside 3 there may be group A, then again 4 there is group B, then again 5 there is group A, 6 group B, 7 group B, it is like that. So that function is generating the random assignment, whether group A or group B. The investigator is not having control. Whatever the software is showing, historical that table is showing, the investigator has to follow that only. He cannot change or she cannot change out of their own will. So whatever that number is assigned, random number table generation, that will be there. And that there is this sealed envelope technique. Sealed envelope technique means there are certain sealed opaque envelopes within which the group allocation is kept. For example, in the sealed envelope, there is a written group A or group B. Such a stack of 100 envelopes is kept on your table. Okay, maybe there are 50 group A and 50 group B, but you do not know which is which. Okay, they are shuffled and kept. Whenever a patient will get allocated, they will come, and that person who is sitting and in charge of giving the envelopes, they will take the envelope at the top and give it to them. They will open it and see, okay, I have been allocated in group A. Then they will go. So neither the person sitting who is giving the envelope or the person who is in the as a participant will know what group they are going to get. Whatever group they will get, that is a sealed opaque envelope techniques, envelope techniques, and they will be going to that group only. In this way, the participants are divided into the two groups. That is the randomization. So as you know, it is a heart of the trial, very important. So randomization is mainly distributing the known and the unknown factors between the two groups, and now you will give the exposure. Now you will start the study and give the exposure. That is called manipulation. Manipulation now here means you are giving them that exposure or the intervention. So that intervention, exposure, then other factors, those are the independent variables, and the outcome that will happen is the dependent variable. So the follow-up will take place after that, should be defined at defined intervals till final assessment. That is, you can do the follow-up at the end of the study, or you can do multiple follow-ups at 1 month, at 2 months, at 6 months, and then you end the study at 2 years. Like that. You will follow up at certain intervals and see the outcome measure, whatever outcome you want to see. The occurrence of diabetic nephropathy. You are giving lifestyle modification in one group and standard care in another group. And then you follow up at 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, and see how which group is improving how much, or which group is not developing the diabetic nephropathy by how much. You are measuring that by follow up. There may be attrition. Now there is something called attrition, means there may be dropout. Since you are doing a follow-up study, many patients can say, I cannot continue this study any longer, I want to drop out. Okay, or some may die, some may go to another place, they drop out. So there may be attrition. An assessment account for bias. Now we finally assess the results. Okay, whatever results you are doing between the two groups outcomes, okay, but then you have to understand that there may be bias, subject bias, observer bias, bias in evaluation. Subject bias means if a participant knows that I am being giving the new drug or that intensive lifestyle modification I am subjected to, I am in the better group or maybe the new group, the intervention group, then the participant will automatically start to respond much better. They will feel much healthier. They will think they are feeling much healthier. So that is a subject bias. Okay, they might, the outcome will be manipulated like that. No, it will be an error. So, if the subject or the participant starts reacting like, okay, I am getting the better intervention, I will be better soon. So, I am very happy. I am this all the results are also very good, and they are doing that intervention more sincerely than they would have in normal circumstances. So, that is a subject bias. Then there is the observer bias. The investigator who are seeing at the follow-up between the two groups, they are asking more detailed questions to the intervention group than the control group. Okay, but in reality, what you have to do, you have to ask same questions to both groups, or you have to assess them similarly and see the difference. You cannot put your attention more to the intervention group than the control group. That will create a observer bias. And then bias in evaluation. If the person who is doing the analysis or the evaluation is knowing that yes, this new intervention should be better, they are having in mind, so they are over exaggerating the results or something. So there can be a bias in the evaluation also. So these are all bias or the error, the systematic error. Bias means the systematic error that can occur in a study. That is there a flaw in the study design in only. That is the bias. So you have to tackle for this bias. You have to make this bias as negligible as possible. For that, in RCT, for this bias especially, there is the blinding done. Single blind, double blind, triple blind. Blind means that the person will not know. They are blind to whatever is happening. So, for the subject bias only, there is a single blind. Means the participant is not knowing which group they are in. Now, that is possible for some interventions, that is not possible for some other interventions, obviously. In a intensive lifestyle therapy versus standard care, obviously the people in the groups will know what they are exposed to. So, there the blinding is not possible. But in a clinical trial, whether you are getting a vaccine or a placebo, drug A or drug B, the participant is usually not informed. Okay, so that is a single blind. Then to tackle both the subject bias and the observer bias, both of this, there is a double blind. The participant will not know and the people who is giving the treatment at that time will not know. Whoever is giving me the drug or the vaccine will also not know what they are giving. They are just seeing that okay, this patient has come, ID number er সাথে there is this vial number. I have to give the drug or the vaccine from that vial. Okay. In the original system, that vial is connected to that patient, that they have randomized from their level that which patient will get which intervention. But the people who are giving it at the ground level, they do not know what they are giving. Okay, whether the vaccine or the placebo, or drug or the placebo. And then finally, bias in the evaluation. All these bias will be covered in the triple blind. The people who are analyzing, just analyzing or evaluating the results, they are also not knowing that which intervention is A and which intervention is B. They are knowing only, okay, there are two interventions, A and B. I do not know which is the new drug and which is the standard drug. So I am just evaluating the results. Okay. So this is how the management of the bias is done in the RCT. This is a single blind study, double blind study, triple blind study. Okay. And the allocation, the random allocation itself, randomization itself is eliminating the selection bias. So all these biases that can occur in the RCT, these are tackled in different means. Okay. So these are the 6 steps of randomization. 6 steps of randomized control trials. RCT র এই 6টা স্টেপ আছে তোমাদের বইতে, ঠিক আছে? It is you just have a read after this class. Now there is the types of RCT. I told you that were 2 parallel RCT and there is the crossover RCT. Okay, what is parallel RCT? Very simple. Take the sample, you assess them and then randomize them into therapy group and control group, or the intervention group and the control group, and then you assess the response. Compare the responses between the patients. So now that you have randomized them, the therapies are going parallel to each other. They are giving this intervention parallel to each other. They are followed parallelly and then the response is also assessed parallelly. So this is a parallel arm study design. Okay, it is very easy to understand. Now what is a crossover study design? The study participants intentionally cross over to the other intervention arm. Means the one, if group A is given drug A and group B is given drug B, then after some time this group A will be given drug B and group B will be given drug A. They will be crossed over intentionally by the investigators themselves. So each participant first receives one intervention by randomization. At the end of this first intervention, each participant is switched over to the other intervention. The 2 interventions are separated by a washout period to get rid of the effect of the first intervention. Means before you are crossing them over, you are allowing them a gap. You have assessed that intervention first, whatever they were allocated, then you give a gap of maybe of some time of 1 month, 1 week, whatever, depending on the disease. And then you, once the washout period means the effect of that intervention is gone, then you cross them over and see again the intervention of the other drug in that same people. Okay, so each person is acting as their own control, kind of. So they are being tested for drug A versus drug B in their own body only. So what that is entailing is, the advantage is you can take less number of participants because each person is acting as their own control only. So you do not need so many people to see the difference between the 2 groups. Usually this crossover study design, they are having half the sample size of what it is there originally if it was a parallel study design. That is there. Second thing is, in which cases this crossover study design is usually done. It is not done in all cases. Like if you are giving them some drug and if they are cured of the disease in that intervention only, then how can you then cross them over to the other intervention, right? They are already cured, so they are no longer the participant eligible for the study. So usually it is given in the chronic diseases. That is, it will not heal, it will not be cured, but maybe some effect will be there, some short-term effect will be there, not long-term effect of the intervention. Some short-term effect of the intervention will be there. Then there will be a washout period when the intervention's effect is going away. After that, then you will again introduce another intervention to that group. So that is the crossover period. So it is occurring for chronic diseases with interventions that have a short period of effect. Okay. So in those cases only you do the crossover study design. So what is happening is, after randomization you administer the therapy and the control, you assess the response after some time, then you give a washout period, and then in this group you administer the control, in this group you administer the therapy, and then again assess the response. Now you can compare the response between the groups, you can compare the response within the groups also. So that is why the sample size in these types of studies are very less, because each patient is acting as their own control. But obviously in usually chronic diseases where the effect of the intervention is short-lived. Only those conditions only the crossover RCT is done. Understood? বুঝতে পারছো সবাই অল্প অল্প করে একটু? So each participant serving as his or her own control, thereby reducing the effect of the inter-individual variability. So another advantage is because a person that are there in the RCT, each will be varying. One person is obviously not the same as the other person, right? So there is always the difference in response between the individuals. But that is also, that error is also being removed by this crossover RCT because each person is acting as their own control. Needing fewer participants than a parallel RCT. It is used only for diseases which are stable and chronic and cannot be cured and where interventions provide only transient relief, short-term relief. Now, there are types of RCT, means where the RCT can be used, where this RCT methodology can be used. It can be used in clinical trials, okay, where you can test new treatments, new combination of drugs, new approaches to surgery, new radiation therapy, etc., etc. You can do preventive trials, like to find better ways to prevent the disease in people and to prevent the disease recurrence using any medicine, vaccine, vitamin, mineral, lifestyle changes. So you can do preventive trials. You can do the risk factor trials, that is finding the results for the risk factor modification. Single factor or multi-factor trials means if you want to study the risk factors of certain diseases, you can do the risk factor trials. You test for the risk factors. There is a cessation trials, maybe you want to stop an exposure. Stopping of smoking in one group versus people who are they are doing their normal lifestyle and you seeing the difference in that outcome. Trial of etiological agents, evaluation of health services. So health services also you can compare. So in these are all the types of studies that you can use the RCT methodology in. Okay. Now there is the non-randomized trials. Non-randomized trials means there is no randomization. So participants are assigned to different intervention without following a random procedure. You are assigning them to group A and group B, but you are not doing any randomization. So such trials are also there where you are doing the experiment, you are giving the exposure, but you are not assigning the participants randomly to the two groups. So obviously there will be an error. Okay. For instance, this may be based on the investigator's convenience or whether the participant can afford a particular drug or not. Maybe the cost is borne by the participant themselves. So in that case, they will be offered a choice whether you can get the new drug or you can follow the old procedure itself. So they will be given a choice. So it is not random, it is non-randomized trial. Design is susceptible to bias, validity of the result is low. So in this case, the RCT will give a result that is very good, high level result. Validity of the result is very high, but in non-randomized it is very low. So one type of this non-randomized trial is the uncontrolled trials where there is no control group. It is possible to when a new intervention becomes available, it is possible to a researcher to assign a group of person to receive it. Means you are taking no control group, but you just want to test the effect of a new intervention on a number of people. That is the uncontrolled trials. Compare the outcome with a similar group of persons followed up in the past without the treatment. Means historical controls. Maybe you are taken a group of patients in the records that they didn't receive the treatment versus the people you are taking now and giving the treatment. So you can use those historical controls, but right now at the present you are not taking any concurrent controls. So that is you can take in the uncontrolled trials. It is liable to a high risk of bias. Then there is a natural experiment. Natural experiment means it is kind of like maybe not particularly experimental. Natural experiments means naturally they have been divided into two groups. This is a map again. I have talked to you about that case with the John Snow and how he detected that cholera could be waterborne. This is another study on cholera only he did, where he divided the city of London into two groups. This one group is receiving the water from the Vauxhall company, another group is receiving the water supply from the Lambeth company. What happened is he compared and saw that the cholera deaths and the affected disease, they are much low in the households that are supplied by the Lambeth company and much high in the Vauxhall company. Why? Because he then saw that Lambeth company has placed their, because water used to be provided much like we are provided from the Hooghly river in Kolkata. The water is coming, drinking water is coming from the river only, like that. So there also the water used to come from the river where people use for daily purposes. The Lambeth company had placed their intake from much before London. They have placed their intake pipes much before the London city starts. So the sewage is not dumped yet in the river. But Vauxhall company used to take the water from the London. So what happened is the sewage infested water is going into the houses. So then at that time he had this hypothesis that maybe cholera is caused by the waterborne disease. So I will compare between these two areas. And again, there is some houses had overlap, obviously, so they had a similar number of cases. But he saw especially the houses who were only given by the Lambeth company water, they suffered very less cases of cholera. So that is a natural experiment that occurred at that time. And before after pre-post studies is variable of the interest is measured before and after intervention in the same participants. Means there is a group of participants who are given a certain drug. So before the drug, what was the effect, and after the drug, what was the effect? So before after studies, you are doing it in the same group of person. That is the before after or pre post studies. Such studies have a single arm and lack a comparator arm. For example, change in diet or implementation of alcohol use restrictions, etc. So before the change in diet, you saw what was their health status. After the change in diet, you are seeing what is the change in their health status. That is also an experiment. The investigators themselves giving a change in diet, but you are doing it in the same patients before after. So it is not having a comparator arm. Oh, it is not bad, but it is a weaker design than RCT. Okay, it is a weaker design than RCT. So now that we have gone through the experimental study design, you can see that what are the study questions and appropriate study designs that can be used. Type of question means what do you want to, the aim and objectives of your study, what do you want to find in your study. If you want to study the burden of illness, prevalence, then you do the cross-sectional study. If you want to find out the incidence or the number of person who developing the disease, then you do the longitudinal survey. If you want to see the causation, risk, prognosis of a disease, you do a case control study, cohort study, and even RCT. Treatment efficacy RCT, diagnostic test evaluation RCT, cost effectiveness study RCT. So, RCT is a higher form of evidence, has a higher form of evidence in the hierarchy of studies. At the base, very low level is the case report, case series, etc. Then there is the ecological study, then there is the cross-sectional study, then there is the case control study, then there is the cohort study, then there is the non-randomized trials, and finally the randomized trials, and at the top there is systemic reviews and meta-analysis. So this is the pyramid of evidence. So the higher it is, the more higher form of evidence or the better form of evidence there is. So you can trust the results of that study more than the lower evidence group of studies. So if you want to find out which diagnostic test is better, then you can do a prospective blind comparison compared to a gold standard test. You can do a RCT. If you want to compare therapy, treatment, then it is better to do an RCT rather than this. You want to test prognosis, it is better to do cohort study. If you want to study the etiology or the cause of certain disease, it is better to do RCT. If you want to study any prevention methods, it is better to again do RCT rather than these studies. Okay. So it is depending on the level of evidence. Finally, the observational studies propose, RCTs dispose. What do you mean by that? Observational studies, they are giving forward a hypothesis. RCT will test and prove that hypothesis. Okay? So this is a difference between observational and experimental studies.